This is part 4 of the introduction to the Oera Linda book, translated from ancient Frisian to Dutch by Dr. J. Ottema, and from Dutch to English by Dr. William Sadbach. The other, Neptune, called by the Etrurians Nethunus, the god of the Mediterranean Sea, appears here to have been, when living, a Friesland Viking, or sea king, whose home was Alderga, or Odorp, not far from Alkmaar. His name was Tunis, called familiarly by his followers Neef Tunis, or Cousin Tunis, who had chosen the Mediterranean as the destination of his expeditions, and must have been deified by the Tyrians at the time when the Phoenician navigators began to extend their voyages so remarkably, sailing to Friesland in order to obtain British tin, northern iron, and amber from the Baltic, about 2,000 years before Christ. Besides these two, we meet with a third mythological person, Minos, the lawgiver of Crete, who likewise appears to have been a Friesland sea king. Mino, born at Lindaoord, between Wieringen and Kreil, who imparted to the Cretians an Asega book. He is that Minos whom, with his brother Rhadamanthus and Aeacus, presided as judges over the fates of the ghosts in Hades, and must not be confounded with the later Minos, the contemporary of Aegus and Theseus, who appears in the Athenian fables. The reader may perhaps be inclined to laugh at these statements and apply to me the words that I myself have lately used, fantastic and improbable. Indeed, at first, I could not believe my own eyes, and yet after further consideration I arrived at the discovery of extraordinary conformities which render the case much less improbable than the birth of Minerva from the head of Jupiter by a blow from the axe of Hephaestus, for instance. In the Greek mythology, all the gods and goddesses have a youthful period. Pallas alone has no youth. She is not otherwise known than adult. Minerva appears in Attica as high priestess from a foreign country, a country unbeknown to Greeks. Pallas is a virgin goddess. Minerva is a Burgmagd. The fair, blue-eyed Pallas, differing thus in type from the rest of the gods and goddesses, evidently belonged to Freya's people. The character for wisdom and the emblematic attributes, especially the owl, are the same for both. Pallas gives to the new town her own name, Athenai, which has no meaning in Greek. Minerva gives to the town built by her the name Athene, which has an important meaning in Fries, namely, that they came there as friends. Athene. Minerva came to Attica about 1,600 years before Christ, the period at which the Grecian mythology was beginning to be formed. Minerva landed with the fleet of Ion at the head of a colony in Attica. In later times we find her on the Roman votive stones at Walcheren under the name of Nelhalenia, worshipped as a goddess of navigation, and Pallas is worshipped by the Athenians as the protecting goddess of shipbuilding and navigation. Time is the carrier who must eternally turn the yol, the wheel, and carry the sun along his course through the firmament from winter to winter, thus forming the year, every turn of the wheel being a day. In midwinter, the Yolfest is celebrated on Freya's day. Then cakes are baked in the form of the sun's wheel, because with the Yol, Freya formed the letters when she wrote her texts. The Yolfest is therefore also in honor of Freya as inventor of writing. Just as this Yolfest has been changed by Christianity into Christmas throughout Denmark and Germany, and to St. Nicholas Day in Holland, so certainly our St. Nicholas dolls, the lover and his sweetheart, are a memorial of Freya, and the St. Nicholas letters a memorial of Freya's invention of letters formed by the wheel. I cannot analyze the whole contents of this writing, and must content myself with the remarks that I have made. They will give an idea of the richness and importance of the contents. If some of it is fabulous, even as fabulous it must have an interest for us, since so little of the traditions of our forefathers remains to us. As an internal evidence of the antiquity of these writings may be found in the fact that the name Batavians had not yet been used. The inhabitants of the whole country, as far as the Scheldt, are Freya's people, Frieslanders. The Batavians are not a separate people. The name Batavi is of Roman origin. The Romans gave it to the inhabitants of the bank of the Waal, which river bears the name Patabus in the Tabula Pentingeriana. The name Batavi does not appear earlier than Tacitus and Pliny, and is interpolated in Caesar's Bello Gallico, IV 10. See my treatise on the course of the rivers through the countries of the Frisians and Batavians, page 49 in De Vrije Fries, 4th volume, 1st part, 1845. Good book, I'm going to find that one. I will conclude with one more remark regarding the language. Those who have been able to take only a superficial view of the manuscript have been struck by the polish of the language and its conformity with the present Friesland language and Dutch. In this they seem to find grounds for doubting the antiquity of the manuscript. But, I ask, is then the language of Homer much less polished than that of Plato or Demosthenes? And does not the greatest portion of Homer's vocabulary exist in the Greek of our day? It is true that language alters with time and is continually subject to slight variations, owing to which language is found to be different at different epochs. This change in the language in this manuscript accordingly gives ground for important observations to philologists. It is not only that of the 8 writers who have successively worked on this book, each is recognizable by slight peculiarities in style, language, and spelling, but more particularly between the 2 parts of the book, between which an interval of more than 2 centuries occurs. A striking difference of the language is visible, which shows what slowly progressive regulation it has undergone in that period of time. As the result of these considerations, I arrive at the conclusion that I cannot find any reason to doubt the authenticity of these writings. They cannot be forgeries. In the first place, the copy of 1256 cannot be. Who could at that time have forged anything of that kind? Certainly no one. Still less anyone at an earlier date. At a later date, a forgery is equally impossible, for the simple reason that no one was acquainted with the language. Except Grimm, Richthofen, and Ottema, no one can be named sufficiently versed in that branch of philology, or who had studied the language so as to be able to write in it. And if anyone could have done so, there would have been no more extensive vocabulary at his service than that which the East Frisian laws afford. Therefore, in the centuries lately elapsed, the preparation of this writing was quite impossible. Whoever doubts this, let him begin by showing where, when, by whom, and with what object such a forgery could be committed, and let him show in modern times the fellow of this paper, this writing, and this language. Moreover, that the manuscript of 1256 is not original, but is a copy, is proved by the numerous faults in the writing, as well as by some explanations of words which already in the time of the copyist had become obsolete and little known, as, for instance, in page 82, 114, Tothera flete jefte bedrum, page 151, or 204. Bargun jefta tonun fonsa betstbjar. A still stronger proof is that between pages 157 and 158, one or more pages are missing, which cannot have been lost out of this manuscript, because the pages 157 and 158 are on the front and back of the same leaf. Page 157 finishes thus, quote, 3 months afterwards, Adel sent messengers to all the friends that he had gained, and requested them to send him intelligent people in the month of May. End quote. When we turn over the leaf, the other side begins, quote, his wife, he said, who had been maid of Texland, had got a copy of it. End quote. There is no connection between these two. There is a wanting, at least, the arrival of the invited, and an account of what passed at their meeting. It is clear, therefore, that the copyist must have turned over 2 pages of the original instead of 1. There certainly existed then an earlier manuscript that was doubtlessly written by Lico Oera Linda in the year 803. We may thus accept that we possess in this manuscript, of which the first part was composed in the 6th century before our era, the oldest production, after Homer and Hesiod, of European literature. And here we find in our fatherland a very ancient people in possession of development, civilization, industry, navigation, commerce, literature, and pure elevated ideas of religion, whose existence we have never even conjectured. Hitherto, we have believed that the historical records of our people reach no farther back than the arrival of Friso, the presumptive founder of the Frisians, whereas here we become aware that these records mount up to more than 2,000 years before Christ, surpassing the antiquity of Hellas and equaling that of Israel. This paper was read at a meeting of the Frisian Society, February 1871.